Let's dive in. So before we dive into the content, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this will be recorded and we will be sending a link to watch it on demand afterwards if you need to, or if you need to share it with others. The other thing is that you are encouraged to ask questions, but to keep things on track time-wise, I'm going to ask that you post your question into the chat, and then Corey on our team is going to pull those together and we'll go through them at the end. But please, while the question's in your head and fresh, post it into the chat so that we've got it written down and it captured out of your brain before you forget what it is. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in. I do have the classic 2 obligatory slides. For those of you who don't know me, I am what I call myself a recovering software developer. So techie turned marketer, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. I teach a variety of courses at UW-Milwaukee School of Continuing Ed. I'd encourage you to check that out. And hopefully not of note today, I am married with 3 young children who I love dearly and hope they please don't interrupt this webinar. But if they do, you'll get to meet them. So the other obligatory slide is who is Brilliant Metrics. For those of you who don't know, I know we've got a good number of clients on the call today, but we are a B2B digital first marketing agency, and our claim to fame is that our clients really rely on us to break through to the next level in their marketing, in their business, in their results, etc. We are all about continuous improvement, continuous learning, and just getting better. So now let's dive into the content here. For everyone on the call, I'm sure that you're familiar with your email marketing platform and the metrics that it'll spit out. So you get things like opens, clicks, bounces, unsubscribes. But the metric that isn't in there is deliveries. We as marketers, we hit send, we just assume that email is going to end up where we're sending it to, right? Now, it might end up in a spam folder there, but we're assuming it's at least getting there. And the reality is that's not true. At a minimum, about 1 to 2% of your emails never actually get to the defined destination. And then of those that do, you have very little control over whether it goes in the main inbox, the promotions folder, the spam folder, or again, just gets thrown away. And the reason why we have this unpredictability on the other side is because the email providers have some goals, some things that they are doing to work very hard to provide the best experience they can to their users. So when I say platforms, I'm talking platforms like Office 365 or Google Apps or Gmail or Yahoo Mail. All of these platforms and even some of the corporate spam filters and security software that they'll put in place. They have a duty to protect their users against things like spam and then impersonation. And for those of you who don't know, that picture on the right is actually a South American newspaper that ran a front page article featuring Alec Baldwin instead of Trump. So if you didn't get the reference, that's what it is. The thing that we don't probably know is that anybody can stand up an email server and send email as anyone, just as anyone can send a letter in the mail as anyone. Oh, I just realized you guys couldn't see my screen. So let's try that again. That's the page I'm on. So just as anyone can send a letter in the mail as anyone, anyone can send an email as anyone as well. And that's not common knowledge. So as IT security professionals, we know this. And so IT security professionals will set up protections in place to prevent this impersonation. But as marketers, it's something we need to be aware of so that we don't get our emails thrown away by systems that aren't sure that we are who we say we are. there are 3 gauntlets or 3 areas that platforms will use to keep your email safe and valuable. These are the 3 hidden forces that we referred to in the copy for this webinar. The first is server, and that gets into the physical machinery that's sending your email, the computer systems, not the software, the computer systems. The second is the sender. So which company or domain is that email coming from? And the third, and the one that gets all the press, is content, the contents of that email. The third one, and we'll only talk about it briefly today, is actually the easiest one to solve for. It's the other two that are a bit more complicated in the area that we find that most of our clients and most of the people that I talk to don't know much about. So let's dive into server. And you notice there's a little icon in the lower right-hand corner of which of the 3 gauntlets or forces that we're talking about. When we talk about servers, again, we're talking about the physical machinery that is sending that email. So this is the computer hardware that is sending the email. And every computer has an IP address. And I'm sure you're familiar with this from either home networking or stuff at work, but every machine has an address. And those addresses are either have a good reputation and because they're on whitelists, or a bad reputation because they're on blacklists. So these blacklists or whitelists that that you'll see are hosted by various security companies that look to keep email safe. And your goal as a marketer is to try to not send email through a server that is listed on a blacklist, and if possible, to send email through a server that's listed on a whitelist. And so how do you get listed? Let's talk about the whitelists first, since it's actually easier. When we talk about whitelists, we're talking about computer systems that are known to be reputable. They're known to be good. And you usually find this with a reputable email service provider or marketing automation platform. So your Marketos, Eloquas, MailChimps, Constant Contacts, those folks are often whitelisted. Their machines are whitelisted because they have controls in place to keep bad actors off their platform. If I were to sign up for MailChimp tomorrow and load a list of email addresses that had never heard of me and start sending email about Viagra, MailChimp would be pretty quick to shut me down and kick me off their platform. And because these list maintainers know that, they are willing to keep MailChimp servers on their lists. In contrast, blacklists actually work entirely differently. Nobody's going to volunteer their server IPs for a blacklist. So in order for these list providers to find the blacklists, they actually have to set up traps. And these traps are in the form of non-existent email addresses. These are also called honeypot addresses. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about how they work because they're important to your strategy. When it comes to a honeypot address, a list provider, we'll call them the good guys, will create a fake page out on the internet that is a biography for a person that doesn't actually exist. And then they'll sit around and wait, because what's going to happen behind the scenes is the bad guys, the spammers, and the companies that sell big lists to spammers will scrape the internet looking for pages that contain email addresses, especially if they contain email addresses and contact information and job titles and other valuable contextual information. They will scrape this information and compile it into a database that they can sell or use to spam. So the good guys, the list providers, are just sitting around listening for email to be sent to one of these non-existent people. These people don't exist. They could not have opted into this email. And so if they receive a piece of email at one of these addresses, they know that it's not legitimate, it's not opted in, and they'll penalize the sending server by putting it on a blacklist. The various email platforms, the security software goes and reads these blacklists and throws away the email that's coming from the servers that are on them. So what can you do, right? You're not going out scraping email or scraping web pages and compiling lists. You're not going to buy lists to spam to from shady people in the dark web, right? Unfortunately, what you don't have a ton of control over is when these lists change hands to somebody that seems legitimate. And that happens a lot. And so you'll buy what seems like a very legitimate list from a legitimate list provider, send an email to it, and there's a honeypot address somewhere on it. And now your database is tainted. You don't know which address it is, but anytime you send, your server gets blacklisted. If you are on a shared server, so you're using a normal email service provider like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, all of their servers are shared servers. Or you're on a premium marketing automation platform, an Eloqua, Marketo, or a Pardot, and you haven't opted to pay for a dedicated server. We'll talk about that in a moment. When your server gets blacklisted, you take down everybody else who is on that server, and all of you can't deliver mail until that server gets unblacklisted or delisted. The good news is those platforms will work very hard to get those servers delisted. The bad news is you and everybody else on that server can't send email at that time. So the other thing you want to be mindful of is, well, how good does your email service provider do at getting delisted when this happens? How good is your email service provider at proactively getting whitelisted? And when it comes to email service providers, not all of them are created equal in this department. There's a website out there called emailtooltester.com that actually goes and runs twice a year a deliverability study against the generally more non-marketing automation platform email service providers. So they don't do Marketo or Eloqua or Pardot because I'm assuming they're not willing to pay for a license for one of those just to run their test. But everybody else, they'll go out and sign up for an account and run a test blind. And what you see is that there's some pretty big deviations. To put it in contrast here, for ConvertKit, 86% of their emails went to the inbox, the main inbox, whereas Aweber only 66% of their emails did. The remaining 34 went to either a promotions folder, a spam folder, or surprisingly, I think it was over 5 or 6% didn't get delivered at all, just went into the ether. And that comes down to how well the provider is doing list management. How well are they managing those whitelists and those blacklists? If you are on a premium platform, such as a Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, etc., or even some of the premium ESPs, you have an option to get a dedicated IP. This is a double-edged sword, and there is no right answer. It really depends on your organization and what you want to take on. The pros of getting a dedicated IP are obviously you put yourself on an island and you are in control of your destiny. Nobody else on that server can take you down by doing something stupid. Only you can take you down by doing something stupid. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is that those other people aren't propping you up either, because to some extent, some of this is by volume or the number of times you hit a bad honeypot address that you get blacklisted. So more volume means that sometimes those servers are more likely to be on a whitelist, and more volume means that you're more likely to get delisted quickly and be in good stead. The other thing is it costs extra money to get a dedicated IP. None of these providers just give them out for free. And on top of money, it costs time because now you actually have to monitor that IP address to make sure that it isn't blacklisted. Depending on the platform, they may do some of this monitoring for you, but trust me, if you have a dedicated IP, you want to be monitoring it. And the way that you do that is by signing up with one of a provider like one of these two here. MX Toolbox has been around for a long time. They're kind of the standard. I did run across RBL Tracker that also has a free tracker for these RBLs that might be worth looking into. This can be beneficial even if you are on a shared server. Oftentimes you're sending from the same IP address over and over and over again. So talk to your IT team, talk to your agency, find out if you're doing this IP monitoring. The other thing that we talked about when it comes to server is imposters. Again, I can stand up a server if I know enough, technically geeky enough. I can stand up a server to send email as the Wisconsin Lottery telling people they won, or as the Department of Revenue telling them they owe me taxes. And as much as this stuff sounds like fun, I'm not going to have a lot of success in getting those emails delivered everywhere, because it's up to the receiving platform to decide whether that email is legitimately from the domain that claims they're sending it. And there are controls to help them do that. Those two controls are called SPF or DKIM. SPF is the older technology, DKIM is the newer technology, and uses cryptography on top of some basic controls. Really, you want to have both technologies in place, and you want to make sure that they're set up correctly. I'm not going to get into the details of how to do that, but basically there are settings that you're going to get from your email service provider that you need to get in touch with your IT team. Your agency can probably help you do this in getting the right information from the right person to the right person to make sure that your email is getting delivered consistently. Once you have these in place, it is not a bad idea to do some monitoring to make sure that they're working correctly. And so the tool for monitoring this is something called DMARC. And DMARC is a standard for the receiving platforms to be able to report, hey, I got email and it matched SPF and DKIM, so I believe it's from the right person. Or, hey, I got a bunch of email and it didn't match, and I don't think it's from the right person. This is one of the only feedback mechanisms you have when platforms literally just throw away email. And so when you sign up for a DMARC, you have to involve the IT team again a little bit here to set some stuff up on your domain. But I'd recommend, rather than doing it directly, go through a service, and Postmark offers a free service that we use with our clients to go and monitor this. They'll aggregate the information from all of your platforms in order to make sure that it's all consolidated in one place and easy to interpret. So what we're seeing here is that Amazon services, which we use with our clients, for some of our clients to send email as a relay, the DKIM was lined up, but the SPF wasn't. So something's wrong with the SPF record here, and we need to look into that. So DMARC monitoring is great for troubleshooting to make sure that everything is actually working the way that you think you set it up to work. And it ensures that that deliverability is happening the way it is. All right, we're done with server. Again, I don't see a lot of questions in the chat. Please post your questions in the chat as they come up. We will have time to get through to them at the end, and a lot of this is technical, and I'm trying to move fast, so please get that information out there. The next gauntlet is sender. So this is the domain that you're sending from. These receiving systems actually keep lists themselves that include something called a sender rating, or how reputable is the domain name that is sending this email. So for example, Google might rank pennystock.com at a 4.5, but apple.com at a 9.2. And these numbers are made up because this is actually pretty top secret information, both the algorithms that are used to calculate it and on most platforms what your rating is. But just know that every receiving platform has these ratings for your email domain. The higher the rating, the more likely you're going to end up in the main inbox, not in a promotions tab, not in a spam folder. And I threw one down here called Barracuda. Barracuda is an IT security company that has a mail scanner as part of their product. It's the most popular one for medium and large businesses to run to filter their email on the way in before it lands in their Outlook or Lotus Notes or whatever email client they use. So you might think, well, I'm B2B, I'm sending to companies, I'm not sending to Gmail users, right? Well, a lot of people run Google Apps, Office 365. If you're hosting your email in the cloud, they take care of this for you. And if you're sending to companies that keep their own email servers inside their four walls, they're probably running a product like Barracuda that has their own sender ratings. This applies to you whether you're B2B or B2C. So I said, we don't really know for sure how these algorithms work, but there's been plenty of work done to understand roughly how they work, and they actually share to some extent the high level of how they work. And some of this is just logic. If you think about it, as Google Apps or Gmail, I have a lot of information. I know every time an email hits my platform for a non-existent user, and it's a bounce. I know every time somebody opens an email on my platform. I know every time somebody clicks an unsubscribe link on my platform. I know every time somebody clicks another link on my platform. I know every time somebody clicks that button that says report this as spam. That doesn't actually go back to the sender when you do that. That goes into that platform's algorithms for calculating their sender ratings. I also know when somebody moves an email over to the promotions tab or moves it into the spam folder, right? So all of those are signals of the quality of the sending domain. Your job as a marketer is to make sure that you are providing the best signals that you can. There are two key ways you can do that. First of all is list hygiene. You want to make sure that you're not sending emails that are bouncing when they hit these servers. You want to make sure that you're sending to people that are clicking on the links, and you never want to send to somebody that already unsubscribed. These platforms are listening for those actions, and they will ding you in your sender ratings, and you're going to end up in the spam box or in the promotions tab or not even getting delivered on these platforms. The other thing that you want to do is have a program in place to drop your inactive subscribers. If people aren't clicking on links, if they're not engaging, if they're not opening the emails, there's no sense in continuing to send it to them. All you're doing is you're hurting the deliverability for all the people that would be clicking on those links. Drop those people. Put a program in place that monitors people who haven't engaged in emails in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever you're comfortable with. Get them off your list, and then work to replace them with people that will click. There's something called a re-engagement campaign that you can run. If you're really kind of hesitant about dropping these people, send them an email and say, hey, I'm about to drop you from the list because it doesn't look like you want this email. If I'm wrong, click here and you'll stay on the list. Sometimes that can actually get some people that previously hadn't engaged to start noticing you again. The other thing you can do is work the system, maximize those clicks, maximize those opens, and you do that through A/B testing. So you should be testing your subject lines with A/B test to optimize for open rates. Your subject line is the key thing that'll change whether somebody opens. You should be A/B testing your copy or your content for another metric that isn't talked about as often as it should be your click to open ratio or click to open rate. That stat will tell you whether or not your copy was compelling enough. And if you run two versions and compare them, you can compare them and only run the better performing version next time. Finally, I mentioned that this is a lot secret sauce when it comes to the receiving platforms. Google is actually the most transparent of any of the platforms and will give you your sender rating. Now, they won't give you the exact number or the scale, but they'll tell you whether it's high, medium, or low, which is enough for you to take some action. They'll also tell you when people are clicking that this is spam button. So take advantage of that information. Either you or your agency should have access to your Google Postmaster tools and be monitoring this for you. When they see things pop up, or when you see things pop up, you should be able to take some corrective action and just don't do whatever it was you did to cause the sender rating to go down or the spam clicks to go up. So that's it for sender. Now we're going to jump into really the easiest of all three of these, and that is content. And again, this is the one you've probably heard all of this, that you've probably heard these tips and techniques over the years as the keys to not getting in the spam folder. The reality is the first two are far more important, and this stuff is really table stakes at this point. So the first thing you want to do is look at the content of your email and make sure that the the content contains more text than images and doesn't include a bunch of super racy words. So no Viagra, no pharmaceuticals, no penny stocks, none of that stuff. That's pretty easy if you aren't marketing to a pharmaceutical company. I once had a client that was their job. They were selling to the pharmaceutical industry, and believe it or not, pharmaceutical spam filters still block for the word pharmaceutical. Um, there's simple things like avoiding over punctuating your subject lines that'll also flag sometimes. And then even including your address and your unsubscribe link in the footer of your emails. These platforms will look for that. Now, any one of these things probably won't land you in the spam filter, but it's the combination of them that will. So you put 3 exclamation points at the end of your subject line and you include the word stock somewhere in your email, those two things add up together and it ends up knocking you into that spam filter. So you can get away with a little bit here and there, but just generally follow the best practices. And then the other thing is test. There's actually tools out there that will let you test to see if the major spam filters out there would filter out the content of your email. And so if you're in doubt, throw it through one of the tools and test. Randomly throw some of your emails through some of these tools to test. Litmus and email and acid are the two that are most common in the industry because they'll offer both the ability to see what your email looks like. It's rendered in these different clients as well as understand some of the spam filter stuff. Mail tester is, I think, cheaper or free, and it's an alternative to go out there and do the same thing. That's pretty much it. Those are your 3 main gauntlets there. So just to sum up, when it comes to the server side, make sure you have an SPF and a DKIM record that are configured correctly. Then monitor those with DMARC if you can, or have your agency monitor them with DMARC. You want to consider a dedicated IP if it's an option, but keep in mind that comes with additional cost and the challenge of monitoring. If you have the budget and you're ready, willing, and able to monitor it, and you're sending a good volume of email, a dedicated IP is generally worth it. On the sender side, here you're looking at list hygiene and optimization in order to work that system and get the highest sender rating you can with the various platforms. The only one that'll tell you approximately what it is Google. And so you or your agency should have an account with Google Postmaster Tools to get that feedback. And then finally, when it comes to content, it really just comes down to word choice, text to image ratio, and making sure you have that unsubscribe in your address. That's the one where if you Google it, you'll get about 80 different blog posts with tips that'll tell you how to navigate that stuff. The first two are the stuff that isn't written about enough. So I'm not going to beat a ton of content here on the content side. Feel free to use Google and go out and read the blogs out there that'll tell you how to handle things. And with that, I'm going to invite Corey in. He's been keeping track of the questions that you guys have asked, and he's going to let me know what we're missing here.
Thanks, Steve. I will start. We got a couple good questions from Jessica Jacobson. So the first one that she asked was, can the program to get people off your list be automatic somehow, or is this a manual task? And I believe this was list hygiene was the topic.
That's a great question, Jessica. It depends on the platform that you're on. So if you're on a marketing automation platform like your Marketo, Pardot, Mautic, yes, it's absolutely possible to set up a hygiene campaign. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can set up a campaign that'll go around and listen for these inactive people and literally knock them off the list. Or you can set up a segment or a smart list, depending on the platform, that just excludes anybody who hasn't been active lately. Either way is a great tactic to go, and it's pretty easy to do in those platforms. For a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, on those ones, you generally have to run some sort of a report and go and just remove those addresses. Some of them have tools for list hygiene, some of them don't.
Great. And then I will follow it up with two more questions from Jessica. And these can maybe be answered in conjunction with each
Mhm.
other. Can you remind us which email tester was free? And alongside that, how would you define a good volume of email?
Yeah, yeah. The email tester, I think it's literally called Email Tester. And it was free at some point. I haven't looked at it super recently, so don't quote me on that, but definitely go out and look. It is cheaper than a Litmus or an email and asset account. So it's certainly the most cost-effective tool out there that I found for running spam checks. And I think it's free, but report back, or I'll double check it and let everyone know. When it comes to a good volume of email for running a dedicated IP, usually you're talking about lists that are in the tens of thousands and you're sending emails more than twice a month. That's the kind of volume you really need to make it worthwhile to move to a dedicated IP. For most B2B brands, it's not necessary. For a lot of B2C brands, it really starts to come into play because you're sending that higher volume of email, and deliverability is that much more important, and you're definitely battling promotions tabs. What's next, Corey?
We've got a couple, it looks like specific questions from Jack H. So we'll maybe touch base on those after the webinar.
Yep.
Lastly, it looks like we've got Donato, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I'm not. Just commenting that it would be nice to have a single page PDF that summarizes these concepts. I know that we're going to be putting this out as a recorded webinar, but I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, we can also make the slides available in the short term. Donato, I think that's a great idea and something that we should probably get together and get out on our website so that we can drive some more traffic to our site. But if we do publish that, I'll make sure that we get it out to this list of attendees as well. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Great, and that should cover all the questions that we've got.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining here today. If any more questions come to mind, please connect with me on LinkedIn or email me. I'm more than happy to respond one-on-one. And please follow Brilliant Metrics out on LinkedIn for more content like this. And if you have any feedback on what we could do better, different next time, please do share that with us as well. We're always trying to improve ourselves. So thank you again for your time, and